I remember a lot of the messaging I got as a kid was like, you'll be successful once you solve your ADHD, or like, if you ever got your shit together, you'd be very good at things. And like, I don't always have my shit together, but I also don't know anybody who does.
Right.
The world is built for and by neurotypical people because that's the vast majority of humans, right? But 1 out of 5 people, their brain is fundamentally different in some way. Understanding your brain, your flavor of neurodivergence, allows you to navigate systems that are highly neurodivergent, highly neurotypical, and a mix of the both. There's nothing more satisfying to me than being able to say to a family or a school, like, this isn't a choice. This kid isn't choosing not to read. This kid isn't choosing not to pay attention. This kid isn't choosing to have significant sensory needs. Like, these are neurological differences. Neurodivergent kids aren't failed neurotypicals. They just need different things. We call this book the Neurodiversity Playbook because the parenting books that are written are not written for your kid, right? It's, the strategies that exist are just not going to fit your kid. And so we need to sort of scrap that and build something bespoke. And then to take that to the next level, don't try to do this alone.
Hey friends, this is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff. I have a very awesome interview today with Dr. Matt Zakreski, the author of the Neurodiversity Playbook. But before I get to that interview, I need to ask you for some questions. I know that I have taken a little bit of a different approach with the podcast recently, doing lots of interviews, playing with the format, and as a result, I've gotten much less questions. I've gotten fewer questions, and I need some more. I have some that are coming in at a very slow trickle, but I could use some more variety to craft some really good Q&A shows for you in the future. So if you have a question for me, it could be related to mental health, life, psychology, biology of the brain, relationships, anything like that, send me a question. You can shoot me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, duffthepsych.com, and use the contact form there. Likewise, if you have anybody that could use advice, give them my information so they can send me a question for the show. Now, with that said, who is Dr. Matt Zakreski? Dr. Matt is a psychologist and a professional speaker. He focuses on neurodiversity, and he's passionate for advocating for neurodivergent individuals, which can include people who are gifted, twice exceptional, people who have ADHD or dyslexia, or people who have autism. We talk about all those different things in this interview. He has over 400 speaking engagements under his belt, and he specializes in breaking complex psychological concepts down into actionable points. So an approach you'll probably like if you're a fan of my work. Today, we're going to be diving into his new book, Neurodiversity Playbook, which offers tools and strategies to help neurodivergent individuals thrive in a world that isn't always built for them. So please enjoy this interview. And of course, like I said, shoot me some questions for future episodes. Enjoy. Okay, everybody, I'm very excited to be sitting down with Dr. Matt Zakreski. Dr. Matt, how are you feeling today?
I am so tired. I flew in from our national conference late last night, and I left myself a pretty easy day today. But like the highlight of my day is being here with you, so I'm so tired but excited at the same time.
I'll try to keep you awake. I always like asking my guests sort of what we need to know as background. Like, what do we need to know about you to understand why you became interested in neurodiversity as a primary topic?
I get that question a lot, and my answer almost always starts with like, the work is personal and professional for me. Like, I was identified as a gifted kid in second grade, and back when we didn't know as much about being gifted as we do now, we did, no one considered giftedness a neurodivergence in the 90s, but I was also so smart, no one realized I had ADHD until high school when the wheels fell off. So it's like, oh man, so if I had all these resources and privileges and I still got my butt kicked, like, there are probably kids out there who have fewer resources who are getting their butts kicked even more. So let me use that authenticity of being in the community to advocate for these kids, to help these kids, to show them like, hey, this is a pathway to own your brain and still be successful. And because I remember a lot of the messaging I got as a kid was like, you'll be successful once you solve your ADHD, or like, if you ever got your shit together, you'd be very good at things. And like, I don't always have my shit together, but I also don't know anybody who does.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
So that's the general origin story.
So you said, as a kid, you had so much horsepower essentially that it wasn't a problem, in school, but then in high school, the wheels kind of fell off. Yeah. What did that look like? How did things start to unravel during high school and why?
So there's actually a term for it in the field. It's called the performance cliff. And I've done some research on this. So basically the idea is that like school as it's made is supposed to get a little bit harder every year, right? And if you're a gifted kid, you're smarter than school is hard, at least for the first several years of your life. But after a while, school just gets harder and harder and harder until sooner or later school becomes harder than you are smart. And whereas your neurotypical peers have been learning things like study skills and asking for help and emotional resiliency, gifted kids, because things come pretty easily to them, they don't spend as much time developing those skills. So like in 10th grade, when I couldn't just like white knuckle my way through school anymore, like I couldn't just like flex my brain and work a little harder. I remember telling my mom, it's like, so how is it that people study for things? And that sounds arrogant, right? But I genuinely didn't know. It's like asking like LeBron James, how do you dunk a basketball? Like LeBron just dunks a basketball, right? Like he's just really, really, really good at it. So you have to figure, at least for me, it was this, you've got to figure out these brand new skills that everybody else has had a huge head start on you on. Oh, and by the way, it's high school and you're not only struggling in one class, it's lots of classes. And even the classes you're not struggling in, you're pulling resources away from those classes to catch up in the other class. And it was dogfight, my friend. It was a tough thing. But, I in my research on the performance cliff, you talk to a lot of kids who feel it, it ends up happening sophomore year of college. That's a major spike in the data points. Because freshman year, it's exciting, right? It's new. You're figuring out. Come back for sophomore year, classes are a little bit harder. It's not new anymore. And it's like, and then we see this, oh my gosh, college is hard thing that happens. But at least I was at home and my parents were there and I went to a relatively small high school. So like people knew I could get a lot of supports. I mean, I can't imagine that happening at like State U when you have like 12,000 freshmen. It's like, excuse me, I need help? Me, freshman number 6,110? Like,
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned, in the 90s, there wasn't as much language for this stuff. There is now, but I find that it's very, especially among people who are generally neurotypical, the terminology isn't very clear. Yeah. Can you define some terminology? Like what do you consider neurodiversity? Like what does that actually mean? What falls under that umbrella?
So most brains are neurotypical, right? They function more or less as we'd expect a brain to function for that person's age and place in life. And so 4 out of 5 people are neurotypical. So it's 80% of the world, right?
That's why it's called typical.
Yeah, neurotypical. Yeah. And if you're, since we're mental health professionals, I know I spend way too much time thinking about the normal curve, like way too much. But that
I'm a neuropsychologist, so yes.
Yeah, same. Yeah, right. So like that 80% of neurotypicality is pretty much analogous to that first standard deviation on the IQ spectrum. There's a little flex in there. But you think about that as a terminology. I mean, the world is built for and by neurotypical people because that's the vast majority of humans, right? But 1 out of 5 people, their brain is fundamentally different in some way. It's usually there are differences in function and difference even in form. I mean, one example I commonly cite when we're talking about gifted kids is the amygdala in gifted kids can be up to twice as large as in a neurotypical kid. So that's a sizable difference. And one of the things that is the hallmark of gifted people, certainly I would include myself here, is their intensity of thought, intensity of feeling. So a larger amygdala is one of the things that explains that. So, and then all the brains in all the world are neurodiversity. So I called my book the Neurodiversity Playbook because understanding your brain, your flavor of neurodivergence, allows you to navigate systems that are highly neurodivergent, highly neurotypical, and a mix of the both. So, we're all in neurodiversity together. So we just sort of have to figure out how to get along with each other.
Mm. So instead of taking things as they're built for one type of brain, recognizing what type of brain they're most built for and how to navigate that, how to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some underlying concepts that kind of tie together you're talking about a lot of different types of people here, right?
Yeah.
Some people who are gifted and also would be identified with a learning disability, people who are autistic, who have ADHD. So what are some underlying things that you've identified that bring them together?
So basically, like, every neurodivergence has in common challenges with executive functioning. I mean, there's the obvious ones like ADHD, which is basically the executive functioning, but we see that in gifted kids, we see that in autistic kids, we see that in dyslexic kids. I mean, there's a lot of, at best, different functionality in the prefrontal cortex, but often lower, executive dysfunction, right?
Which means what for people listening?
So if we figure that the prefrontal cortex handles our executive functioning suite of behaviors, right? So that's task initiation, task completion, time management, organization, self-regulation. Certainly there's many more, but those are the ones I tend to focus on in my practice. And then I always sort of name this one, especially because I speak at a lot of conferences. This is always fun to do. Wherever I am in the world, I'll ask, what is the capital of the state we're in? And a room full of educated adult professionals will yell it out, right? Boston or Austin, Texas, or Madison, Wisconsin. And I always say, like, great, guys, none of you raised your hands. and that's what they do. They have that sort of awkward chuckle. They're like, oh, no. Because when you know something really well, your executive functioning piece of your brain, it doesn't inhibit the behavior, right? It doesn't say ready, aim, fire. It says ready, fire, aim. Mm-hmm. And in a room full of adult professionals, we can all laugh about it. But if you're a gifted or twice exceptional third grader sitting in a Miss Jones's third grade classroom and you yell out the capital of Louisiana's Baton Rouge, you're going to get yelled at because you're violating a social norm. Mm-hmm. And that's the source of a lot of challenges with these kids, and adults too. We also see there's a lot of differences in what we call pragmatic language, right? So I always say, we're about the same age. Like, I'm assuming that you watched Friends growing up.
Yes, sure.
Right. So I always say the difference in pragmatic language is the difference between how you doing and, to quote the patron saint of all things, Joey Tribbiani, how you doing?
How you doing?
It's the same words, but the implied meaning is different, right? In how we deliver it, tones of voice, body language. And those are things that many neurodivergent people miss, right? And so when kids are younger, you don't see those challenges as much, right? Because kids tend to be actually very strong communicators. Because when they're co-creating a game, they're like, I want you to do this and this and this and this. A lot of things are named and overt. But think about middle school, high school. Then it's like, if a girl that you like says, like, oh my God, stop. Is that, oh my God, stop, like it's flirty? Or is it, oh my God, stop?
Right.
Like I'm about to call the school counselor, right?
Yeah.
And if your brain doesn't pick up on those nuances, you are sort of always feeling wrong-footed. And this is where we see a lot of social anxiety, a lot of emotional dysregulation, because kids say, like, I'm constantly feel like I'm having to translate in real time, right? Like, what do people mean? Mm-hmm. And that's hard.
And exhausting.
Exhausting. Yeah, that's a great word for it.
Mm. Yeah, because you're running two processes at the same time, essentially. Yeah. Okay, so you're saying executive functioning, those higher level skills, and then pragmatic language, actually understanding the nuance of language, the assumptions that come naturally to people who might be neurotypical. Those are some of the things that tie people together. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
you're going to have to stop me at some point. One other thing I like to point out as a very concrete, tangible difference is the basal ganglia. So basal ganglia, right, for our friends out there, it's a reward circuit. It's highly indicated in obsessive compulsive disorder. It's highly indicated in autism. And what we see is that it's highly interconnected with our thalamus, which is our relay station in our brain, and our cerebellum, which is a regulatory system. And I know you know this, but the idea is what we see in neurodivergent people, that when that basal ganglia fires and there's a discomfort that comes with that, you feel the discomfort more acutely, which means your body is seeking a compensatory strategy,
a solution of some kind.
Right? The compulsion that serves the obsession, or one of the other major differences in neurodivergent kids, and this was a steep learning curve for me, was sensory needs. So if we think about our parietal lobe on top of our brain, much more interconnected, far more connections to our limbic system. So the sensory input we get is directly impacted by that emotional processing, right? So it's not oh gosh, I don't like that sound. That sound makes me want to scream. Or it's
something more extreme.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I tell this story at conferences a lot. I was asked to consult with a young woman here in New Jersey a couple years ago, gifted kid, good citizen, everybody loved her. And all of a sudden she turned into hell on wheels, man. I'm so they brought me in. They're you're an expert in this. See if we can help this kid out. And so we did all the mental health checklists. Was it depression? Do her parents getting divorced? Is she being abused? Was she exposed to some trauma that we don't know about? And she denied everything. We're what are we missing? And at the end of our third session, I was listen, I need to know, is there anything we haven't talked about? Is there anything in your life that's different? She's the only thing that's different in my life, Dr. Matt, is I'm wearing this stupid bra. And she had just gone from wearing a training bra to a bra with an underwire in it, and it was too small for her. So she had a tight metal band jamming into her rib cage every day. And that tension, which she didn't have language for, was just causing her to be in a worse mood, and it was building on itself and getting all that negative reinforcement in the environment. So, you and I, the work we do is not exactly curative in nature. It's not oh, I've solved the problem. But that was the only time in my career where we did an intervention and the next day the kid was back to normal. I felt like Dr. House. I was yes, I am God.
I've had situations like that where it's somebody is hallucinating that they're covered in snakes at night. And it's oh, you have striped sheets, get plain sheets. Problem solved.
Snap.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay. Now, one thing I'm hearing as you talk about this is there are some biological, neurological underpinnings for this stuff. You talked about the amygdala being bigger. You talked about some of the circuits being more active. In the parietal lobe, you were saying that people who are neurodiverse have more, or neurodivergent, I should say, have more connectivity in that sensory portion.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's from imaging studies and stuff like that?
Yeah, a lot of fMRIs. The University of Connecticut, University of Virginia, Johns Hopkins University, Stanford, Northwestern, Purdue. These are the schools that really do this research.
So you're not just making stuff up.
I'll send you some citations if you like.
Yeah. No, well, it's good to know, right? Because people, I think that people who are outside of that might criticize, everybody, everybody's neurodivergent. Everybody has this issue or that issue. And, having some concrete evidence that there are differences in brains is really valuable information.
Yeah. There's one study that they released one of the images, and I'll even send it to you if we want to throw it in the show notes. It's it's so fascinating because it shows a control brain, which we can call neurotypical, a gifted brain, a dyslexic brain, and a gifted and dyslexic brain. And when you look at these scans, the brain lights up as it's being activated. So we see a very particular pattern of activation in a gifted brain and a very different pattern of activation in a dyslexic brain. But the twice exceptional brain that has both of them, it is very clearly the middle ground between those two. And I show that to administrators a lot, because it's like, we're not like, to echo what you said, we're not making this up. Like, we can show you the brain science, and we're learning so much more about this. I mean, there's nothing more satisfying to me than being able to say to a family or a school, like, this isn't a choice. This kid isn't choosing not to read. This kid isn't choosing not to pay attention. This kid isn't choosing to have significant sensory needs. Like, these are neurological differences. And if we accept that, then what we're doing is we're raising that kid's floor so we can hopefully someday raise their ceiling. Because when we move at this from a place of understanding, then we are trying to translate something that makes sense rather than not trying to fix something that we think is broken.
What are some of the approaches or even perspectives that you would consider unhelpful or wrong about neurodiverse people in schools or parenting?
So we're really trying to push for a place of universal design. And the universal design is basically the things that are the most equitable are the best practices, right? Like, instead of having a staircase into your school and the ramp is way over there, what if we just had a ramp? Everybody can walk up the ramp, right? Whether you're in a wheelchair or crutches or whatever. We should teach every kid at the level they need to be taught at, rather than assuming that a second grader needs to learn addition and subtraction. Some second graders do. Some second graders still need to learn their numbers. And some second graders want to do calculus. I work with those kids. I sucked at calculus. I don't know about you. I was bad at it. So, like, these kids are like, oh, Dr. Matt, and then I did this thing with this cotangent. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Love it. It's a very, very cool words you're using just now. Yeah. And then, like, from a mental health perspective, it's really sort of focusing on a skill building perspective. Like, I'm going to teach you strategies to navigate these situations, but just like, I'm very extroverted, and I married an introvert. One of the things that really, like, sort of recalibrated our relationship when we were dating is my wife basically sat down. She's like, I'm an introvert. I transmit energy differently than you. I need different things. She said, but I am not a failed extrovert. I don't need to be you. I don't want to be you. I want to do things my way, and I'll meet you in the middle when I have to. And that was, to me, was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly it. Like, neurodivergent kids aren't failed neurotypicals. They just need different things, right? And I can code switch and be very neurotypical if I need to. If someone's like, hey, we'd like you to keynote at our event, I'm like, I am the most neurotypical person. It's like, yes, yeah. Business, numbers. But when I'm with my colleagues or I feel comfortable, I'm certainly a little bit more atypical, let's say.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very, very solid point. The neurodivergent people are not failed neurotypicals. Because I think, as you illustrated, 90s, certainly previous to that, that's probably how most felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that how you felt?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would like scream at my brain, like, let me just do this thing. Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, that ADHD paralysis where you're laying there on the couch and you're scrolling through your phone and your mom walks by, you're like, my mom would never say, like, lazy piece of shit, but, like, in my head, That's how it, right? Like, I can't believe you're not doing anything. I'm like, my brain is paralyzed by all the things it could do. And as a result, I do nothing. And I know, for me at least, the ADHD conversations I had as a kid were all about executive functioning, build your focus, so build that muscle. I don't really feel like we talked enough about the emotionality that comes with being ADHD, right? The intense emotions, how often ADHD kids feel angry, but also just the shame, like that deep shame that comes with, like, I am so sure in my heart of hearts that I'm a screw up, and I'm just sort of waiting for somebody to spring that trap on me and be like, yes, we've known you're a screw up the whole time. And like, really just giving kids permission to name that and give that some oxygen, because that's an anchor around your neck, man. It's so hard.
Rather than just here are the skills to solve your ADHD.
Right.
Like saying, hey, yeah, it sucks to be in this world that wasn't made for you and that can hurt your self-concept. No. Sorry, that hurts. Just empathy. What about, so my wife is also very introverted, neurodivergent, ADHD, quite possibly on the spectrum. And, she talks to me a lot about how even within the perspectives about neurodiversity, it's often very male centric, right? We focus on how it presents in men, what that looks like. And that's really what a lot of models are built off of. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh man. I also props to your wife, right? Like snaps, like very good. When you were in grad school, did they ever give you the psychology is weird, WEIRD?
I do not remember.
Yeah. So it's like so many of the studies are white, educated, industrialized, right? Like I forget what the other two are, but like, but we represent that dominant paradigm. And so, I was just actually on a podcast about this. It's called Find the ADHD Girls. And then we're talking about like, why is this a thing, right? So we know that ADHD people in general, boys and kids assigned male at birth tend to be more hyperactive type, and girls and people assigned female at birth tend to be more inattentive type. And this becomes really important because if you're a classroom teacher, and most referrals for this come from classroom teachers, you've got 26 kids in your room, you're not going to notice the quiet kid in the corner who's looking out the window. You're going to notice the kids who are having sword fights with their rulers, or the kid who's like trying to like gargle thumbtacks or climb the flagpole, right? Like You're going to notice the big behaviors. And maybe you've got a small question in your brain about Sally, but her grades are okay and she's a good kid in class, and frankly, you've got bigger problems, right? And at home, like at home you can hide, right? There are fewer demand tasks. And those are the kids who I think really suffer in silence, right? They suffer in this sort of, like no one's going to understand it, because like there's, if you look at the societal, pop culture versions of ADHD out there, they're almost all this hyperactive, ridiculous, awkward, goofy type. And yes, that's a lot of my practice looks like that. But there's something very rewarding about helping a kid see that ADHD is so much more than that. And when we can raise awareness of that, then teachers and coaches and parents and admin, they start finding ways because they're asking the right questions, not just trying to see things through one lens.
What are some of those right questions? Like how can maybe a parent listening or a teacher listening or somebody like that not fall into that trap of really focusing only on one subtype?
So my go-to there is quiet and compliant don't mean attentive. I think that's really important, right? Because it's very easy to mistake quiet for quiet for attending. But I mean, a lot of times in school, I was very quiet. I was like, But in my head, like I'm playing Dave Matthews Band live at Red Rocks, and I'm just like, yep, top notch, whatever. Yep, I think that was Millard Fillmore. Love me some Millard Fillmore. That's top notch. Yes, very, very, very good. And when you're a bright kid, you learn how to cut corners. You learn how to like sort of like do what I like to call the ADHD scramble, where it's like, oh shit, that's due in like 6 minutes. Here's something you get a 91 on it, and nobody knows. And it's funny, like technology in some ways has really helped ADHD kids, because like back in the day, like they would write the homework on the board, right? Read pages 16 through 45 tonight. And teachers tend to write that at the board at the beginning of class or at the end of class. the 2 times in class where kids are most dysregulated, right? And it's easy to think how your hyperactive types are going to miss that because they're running around, but the inattentive types are having trouble doing that task switching piece of executive functioning, right? I was in gym class, now I'm in English class. I need to move my brain from from gym class to English class. But in the way that how much bandwidth that takes up in our brain, that's when you're going to miss those details, those little moments where the teacher's like, remember guys, there's a quiz tomorrow. Your brain's so busy running other things, right? Yeah, sure, great, yep. I tell parents all the time, it's like, don't let your kid yes you to death, right? Like, ask questions for understanding, not just compliance, right? Like, I'll say to my own kids, I'm like, hey, can you go get me that thing? I'm like, sure, Dad. I'm like, what did I ask you to do? They'll go, I'm like, I'm not trying to catch you. This isn't like a gotcha journalism moment. This is it's easy to say sure, especially when you're a little bit anxious and self-conscious about the fact that you weren't really paying attention, right? And then, but if you can have that sort of vulnerability, resiliency, whatever word you want to use, to say, hold on. I didn't hear that. I did not attend to the thing. I said yes because I want to say yes, but I'm not sure what I'm saying yes to. And if you can normalize those kinds of conversations, then it short circuits the tendency of ADHD kids to get into cycles of blame and shame. Mm-hmm. You should do this, but I didn't do it. Well, why aren't you doing it? Because I didn't know about it, but I told you it. And down and down and down it goes, right? Mm. So, making sure that people actually are following what we say goes a long way to getting out in front of those problems.
And not creating that cycle of feeling like they're in trouble all the time for who they are as a person. Yeah. These are great, these are great things to look out for and great tips. I appreciate that. If I had asked you, do you feel like it's any different in women? You might be like, yeah, versus like, what do you have to say about that? Right. So, example in vivo. What's your perspective on assessment? You can go to your doctor and say, I think I have XYZ, can you help me? There are certainly specialists and stuff, but like, what's your perspective overall about where assessment stands right now for these things?
I mean, unfortunately, it's still really lacking. I think it's way too tied to the DSM, which listen, we have to have standards of practice. We have to be able to speak the same language, but in one of my workshops, I do, and these are usually geared at teachers or parents and not mental health professionals, right? But I'm like, here are 5 cases from my caseload, kids who were referred to me for something else who ended up also being gifted. What do you think they were referred for? And I'm not citing chapter and verse from the DSM, right? Like, to have dyslexia, you have to be 1.5 grade levels below what we would expect you to be. Like, what does that mean to a 3rd grade teacher? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right. But I can say a kid who works their ass off not to go into the English class, a kid who is always losing their book, right? Like a kid who spends most of their class echoing what other people say. Like, I think Tom Sawyer is on a hero's journey. I also think Tom Sawyer is on a hero's journey, because aren't we all? We're not, right? So I like to do that stuff because that's what assessment to me is really about. It's capturing what it looks like and feels like in the real world. And so that's why I always ask, when I do my Connors, when I do my autism questionnaire, when I do my RADS, like, I certainly get those data because we need data. I love data. But on the other side, like, I am also trying to always ask those Confederates, like mom, dad, soccer coach, CCD, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, with my high school kids, I'll like, if you'll give me permission, I'd love to talk to your significant other. Right.
That's a great one.
Because that's where you let those guards down a lot. Right.
Yeah.
And you hear stuff like, oh my gosh, I can tell when they're paying attention to me because I feel like I'm the only person in the universe. But I also can totally tell when their brain is miles away. And it's so, it's so heartwarming to just see the humanity in it. because I think the thing that psychology has done wrong or missed the boat on is that we tried to follow the medical model, right? Like if you have pneumonia, you have pneumonia. Like it's a thing. That's what that is. We can see it on the scan.
My kid in the other room literally just got a chest X-ray and has pneumonia right now.
It's everywhere. I mean, I'm pretty sure my kid has it too. Like it's got that very, very typical raspy cough, right? It's like a very much a thing. And you listen to the chest thing and it sounds like snap, crackle, and pop in there.
Yeah.
Not a great thing. But like,
you look at it on an X-ray, you get antibiotics. That is what it is.
Check, good. But like when you and I, who are mental health professionals, we're like, well, what is depression? Like, I know it when I see it. I know it when I feel it. We can talk about serotonin, but it's fundamentally more nebulous and it's fundamentally more personal, right? Like the diagnostic manual, people with depression can overeat or undereat. They can hypersleep or undersleep. And it's like, if you said that to a layperson, they'd be like, I'm sorry, that's insane. And we're like,
it's like a zodiac thing,
right?
Like the horoscope.
Spin the wheel of mental illness. Let's go. And it's wild, right? So,
but you do know it when you see it.
Yeah, we know it when we see it. And that's why this work is always going to be more fundamentally personal. Right. So we need like a true biopsychosocial of that person. Right. And, and if we're being realistic, that takes time and talent and relationships with clients. And if you're like, I remember being in community mental health and they were like, okay, well, we need to diagnose these kids. I was like, I'm a 4th-year grad student. I'm not supposed to diagnose anybody. They're like, well, the insurance needs to know what we're seeing them for. I'm like, the kid says they have OCD. They're like, I guess they have OCD then. I'm like, what a broken system this is.
Right.
So and
then that stays on their problem list for the rest of their life.
Forever. Right. And, so, I mean, it's a thing where the system is stacked against us to do this work well. And that's where I think specialists do come in. I think that, as a country, it seems we seem to celebrate the death of expertise. I want to push back. I want to do the other direction. Like, because like your kid has pneumonia. I hope they don't need to go see a specialist, but I would want them to see a lung doctor if they had to see a lung doctor. Right. Rather than just constantly going back to your GP to get more amoxicillin. Right. Like I tell people all the time, like, well, actually, I would bet you see this in your practice too. Nobody starts with us.
Rarely. Yeah.
Right. It's like most of the time people have tried a couple other providers, a couple other things. It hasn't been customized, hasn't been specific enough. It hasn't been neurodivergent affirming enough for them to get full benefit out of what they're doing. But then you get to a provider that gets it, that does specialize, who can speak the subtext around this stuff. And I think it's much more affirming. I think people feel more seen and then they get better faster, which is like the weird part of what we do is like, we need to make ourselves irrelevant. Like, I don't want you to see me forever, right? I want you to go on, live your life.
We're not chiropractors. Sorry if there's chiropractors out there. We want to work ourselves out of a job, not maintain a job forever.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Before I ask you some specifics about the book, there was one, I send out a few kind of screener questions to my guests. And one thing I like to ask is something you don't talk about enough. You don't get to talk about enough. And what you wrote down was making therapy work for kids. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
I think that a lot of times, so my mentor in grad school, a tremendous psychologist named Dr. Michael Cassano, he's like, I was great at manualized CBT treatment. Like I would do these R1 studies and my protocols always looked the same. I did this intervention, then this intervention, then this processing, then this intervention, and then here's your worksheet, go home. And he's like, you're never going to be that guy. Like you are too individualized for that. And he's like, and that's not a bad thing. But I think kids need to feel safe. And they need to connect to things at sort of a more fundamental personal level. So I can't tell you how many parents are like, well, Johnny has got to get his grades up. I need Johnny to get his grades up. And I talked to Johnny, he's like, I couldn't care less about my grades. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I didn't really care about my grades in high school either. I was like, but I know you're on the tennis team. He's like, yeah, I got to keep a B average or I can't play tennis. I'm like, so let's keep that B average so you can play tennis, right? Mm-hmm. So you can have a date to the prom for somebody on the other tennis team, right? Like that we can make that happen. But, to build that rapport with kids, because the trust is so important. Like a lot of times, like I play a lot of Uno. Like I have a lot of, I cannot tell you how many fanfics I've read, or like had conversations about deep Star Wars canon. Because now listen, I'm
to build rapport with
right. I'm a professional nerd, right? Like I was like, absolutely, we'll talk about Lord of the Rings back canon with you, absolutely. But it serves the fundamental purpose of helping this kid feel seen, helping this kid feel heard, and most importantly, if you're doing your job, there's good therapeutic content in their fandoms, in the things they share with you, right? Because behavior is communication. Right? Mm-hmm. If a kid wants to talk to me about how their favorite superhero is Deadpool, not because he curses all the time, but because Deadpool is sort of like omnisexual. Mm-hmm. Then the kid is communicating something with you, right? Like, okay, like I'm just planting that scene in the back of my head right now. Like, I had a kid who's like, I really like Percy Jackson because I find like the Greek myths really interesting, and we had a lot of conversations about mythology and his Greek heritage and like, concepts of like destiny and legacy and family. And it, that was a really cool thing, right? That it's so much more than what it appears on the surface. But I think with a lot of the adults I see, like they come to therapy like, hey, I had a fight with my partner. Can we talk about that? That's like concrete, direct to the point. Kids, we need to be more welcoming and meet them where they are. And I think that's the art to making this work for kids.
Yeah, beautiful. I definitely had those experiences as well. As you were talking about, Deadpool, Percy Jackson, I remember talking about, video games, right? Kid who's super into playing World of Warcraft. And it's like, okay, so why do you always play, the tank character that soaks up damage for your party? He's like, well, that's who I am. That's what I am in my family, and yeah, very fruitful. So yes, I think that's great advice. Tell me about the book itself. How is it structured? Who is it? Who's it actually for?
So I was joking around with this with my editor. I was like, this book is for anybody who is neurodivergent, works with someone who's neurodivergent, or loves someone who's neurodivergent. Right.
So everybody.
Yes, exactly. See, that was what my editor said. And she was like, oh, that's diabolical. I'm like, it's not diabolical. I mean, it's a little diabolical, but like, that's the thing. Like, the reason I say this 4 out of 5, 1 out of 5 thing all the time is that neurodivergence isn't some niche thing. I mean, if 20% of people are neurodivergent, we're recording this right before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. If you have more than 10 people at your Thanksgiving, odds are at least one of them is neurodivergent, right? Like, odds are, gang. And like, when you think about certain fields or groups, you're going to run into a lot more neurodivergence than other places. I got to give a talk at NASA earlier this year, and I was talking to their one of their communications experts, and he's like, "Oh man, do you think there's a lot of neurodivergent people here?" I was like, "At NASA?
Yeah,
no, couldn't possibly be full with gifted and autistic people. Never, not once. Yeah. That's so weird." And so, like, yeah, I mean, regardless of where you are in life, you're going to run into a neurodivergent person. And if you have a playbook that helps you connect with them more effectively, you are getting the best version of that person. And we know that neurodivergent people are often underutilized resources. So it's whether that's in the classroom, the boardroom, or in your family or in your kitchen, like tapping into that stuff is like, it's lighting a rocket ship. You just need to know what's the fuse.
Mm-hmm. So tell me more about the book then. So what is it like? How is it structured? What is the book? What is it?
So it started as me sort of writing down my 10 most popular talks. Okay. And then I realized they didn't have a through line. Like it was just 10 chapters of me giving talks. And frankly, you can find that on YouTube. Right. Mm-hmm. And I realized that one of the things I have always felt in my life as a neurodivergent person is that everybody else seems to have access to some sort of code, some sort of like neurotypical monoculture that like, did you all have a meeting and not invite me? Was like, did I miss the Facebook invite? What's the deal here? And how othering that can feel. And yet to not have kids have to mask all the time and pretend to be neurotypical, or how to try and turn people's brains from neurodivergent to neurotypical, because we don't want either of those ideas. So the metaphor that runs through the book is how to crack the code, right? And it all comes down to the idea of code switching, right? So I mentioned before, like if I'm trying to book a keynote somewhere, I'm very professional, I'm very poised, I'm doing all the things I need to do. And and when I see a client who's like gifted, ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, and it's just bouncing all over the place, like I'm going to let myself be as, neurospicy as I need to be to do that. So it's not about selling yourself out. It's about developing another code, the ability to switch languages to navigate different worlds, because I want my neurodivergent clients to get jobs and have dates and be successful in college interviews and everything else that the broader systems of society require us to do in a very particular way. Right. So, so I hate these books that are like, that they sort of baby it, like, oh, like, you just got to love yourself. Like, that's not anything. Or it's like all this like brain science and theory, but nothing tangible. Yeah. So to me, like if my talent as a psychologist and a speaker is the ability to take a concept, distill it to an action point and say, hey, so when you're in a conversation with somebody and you want to leave the conversation, right, here are some strategies that you can use to exit a conversation that are not considered rude, but also don't mean you have to stand there for 4 hours as pee drips down your leg because you don't know how to exit a conversation, right? And I find that when you can give people strategies, you add tools to their toolbox, and then then you get into this wonderful thing where they feel more competent, so they feel more confident. When they feel more confident, they feel more competent. When they feel more, and it becomes a virtuous cycle, not a vicious one.
The conversation ender is a good example. Do you have any other kind of practical tips in there that you might throw out as an example that you give in the book?
One of my favorite ones, and this gets into sort of the broad like social emotional space, is the difference between intention and impact. Right. So if you and I are playing catch, right, I'm throwing the ball to you, you throw the ball back to me, you throw it to me, I miss the ball, it hits me, breaks my nose. Right. Now I'm covered in blood. Now I'm going to ask you this, mental health professional, did you want to break my nose today? Was your game plan?
No comment.
Yeah, but I was like, boy, he thought about that for a minute, gang.
No, of course not.
And because a lot of neurodivergent kids, we see, especially in giftedness, ADHD, and autism, we see these kids are like, I didn't mean to. Like, I know you didn't, buddy. Right? I know that you were just messing around with your buddy and you pulled the fire alarm. I get it. But it doesn't change the fact that the fire alarm is pulled. It doesn't change the fact that my nose is broken. Right? But so this gets into like, I honor your intention, and we can process what the impact of that was. And then if the environment is willing, you can back chain that back to their intention. It's like, listen, you're absolutely right that this kid's nose is broken, but there is a big difference between I walked up to you and sucker punched you, and we were just throwing a frisbee around on the quad and I missed. Like, it doesn't change the impact, but it changes the lens through which we use it. And I find that to be so helpful for a lot of parents in particular, because you'll go 43 rounds with your kid over whether they meant to do it or not. But those aren't helpful conversations, right? They don't move the conversation forward.
Yeah. Great. One thing for me, so I'm an author as well. And, one thing that is really important to me in writing is, I don't know if there's a better term for it. I try to call it like empathetic writing, like writing for the person that's actually reading the book. So somebody who has severe anxiety doesn't want a tome about anxiety because that's impossible for them to process, right?
Yeah.
What about for this book? How is the neurodiversity book for neurodiverse people? Like, how has that been kept in mind?
Oh my gosh. Well, so there's two things. Like, one is my line editor went through and she's like, there's this like a 280 page book. So she page marked every concept in the book. So it's not like a glossary, it's at the chapter. So it's like, if you want to learn the scooper technique for executive functioning, right? That's on page 187. And I just love that because I can be really strategic with this. But the executive functioning thing in particular, and I'm going to actually like try and quote this directly.
Yeah.
So, so chapter 5 is executive functioning, and it opens with, hooray, it's everybody's favorite topic, executive functioning. This chapter is going to be a real blast. Make sure you top off your copy, grab some Song peppermint gum, maybe take a quick walk around the block. We have to get our brains and bodies ready to talk about executive functioning. So if you're listening to this audiobook, feel free to bump up it to 1.5 speed and get yourself a treat, because this is going to be hard for you, but it's really necessary. So like we are absolutely level setting. Like I'm throwing in some strategies, but this isn't like, like I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side, right? Like I know this is hard for you to listen to or hear, because how many times have you heard some version of this conversation in your life? It does not end with me handing you a planner and say like, hey man, use this planner. It's going to solve everything, right? Because that's not empowering. That's not specific. And I just, so it's sort of filled with moments like that where like, I'm trying to be it's almost like breaking the fourth wall, honestly. Like, I'm just like, hey, I'm going to speak directly to you right now. Like, this is a tough chapter to read. Give yourself some self-care, or like, if you feel free to skip through the parts of this you don't need, right? Take what you want, leave what you don't.
Good. Yeah. Did you record the audiobook? Like, is it you reading it?
So the way my contract was written is that if I sold 2,000 books by Christmas, I get to record it. And we have just crossed that number. So sometime
you will be recording it.
Yes, I am so excited. I put in a whole thing in there about thought changing, just so I can do my Christopher Walken impression. And I was like, I get to do it. It's going to be.
How does your wife feel about that?
She's like, that's a good one. She's like, not all of your impressions are good, but that one I've worked really hard on.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, congrats about that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So that implies that the book is already doing well.
Yeah, it's exceeded my wildest expectations. I mean, I never thought I would write a book. I would never thought people would want to read it. And here we are, and like, we're still tracking #1 in gifted education. And that's been almost a month now. And,
nice.
Like, it seems to really have some staying power. I mean, we sold so many books at the national conference. I mean, it almost brought me to tears, honestly. Like, it's so flattering, I guess is the word I would want to use. Like, and there's no false modesty here. Like, I'm not a good enough actor to have any false modesty. I'm like, no, this literally blows my mind, right? I am like shocked by this. So it's a nice problem to have.
Amazing. And that means it's going to hopefully really help a lot of people. And that's the idea, right? So that's awesome. That's awesome. Before we start wrapping up, what would you like to say last to the people listening, in terms of, there's a lot of people out there who are neurodivergent. There's a lot of people out there who may be raising neurodivergent kids. Is there a final piece of wisdom or advice that you might have for them?
Absolutely. And we call this book the Neurodiversity Playbook because the parenting books that are written are not written for your kid, right? It's, the strategies that exist are just not going to fit your kid. And so we need to sort of scrap that and build something bespoke. And then to take that to the next level, don't try to do this alone. Like, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Do you know the rest of that proverb is that, and it takes a village to raise that child's parent? Right? right? So
Is that true?
yeah, I mean, it's the full version of the quote. Just like you people always say the customer's always right, but the original quote was the customer's always right in matters of taste. So,
right. So important context there. Yeah.
Very important context, right? So go to your state gifted organization, see if you can go to the National ADHD conference. There are the actually autistic group puts all these panels together. And it's one of those things, like, even if you never meet these people in person, even if you're just dialing into the webinar, like my colleague, Debbie Steinberg-Kuntz, she has a group called Bright and Quirky Kids. And they get kids from, I've seen kids from their webinars from like UAE to New Zealand to Nepal to like San Francisco, right? But the power of community educates us, lifts us all up, and most importantly, it feels like we're not alone, right? Because being neurodivergent can feel very lonely.
Do you mind sharing some of the maybe links to some of the good organizations as a starting place that I can throw into the show notes?
Absolutely.
Cool. I know it's always hard to know between organizations or Facebook groups or what kind of where to start with some of these things. Awesome. Where should people be looking out for the book? Where would you like people to search for it?
Well, so you can buy it on my website, drmattzakreski.com/book. We really overthought that one. You can also get it on Amazon. I have an author page and everything. And if I am at a conference near you, I will almost certainly have them with me. So I'll sign it for you and everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very, very much for spending some time with me. It's been a pleasure. And I want to congratulate you again on the book doing really well so far.
Well, I mean, I respect you so much, not only as a mental health professional, but also as an author, because I have your book on the shelf behind me here.
Really?
It's buried back there, but I'm and it's just really it's so nice to connect in that way and just really share this stuff and with someone who really gets it, which is very cool. So thank you for the opportunity for me.